Friends, thank you for being here today. We gather at a moment in history that requires clear eyes, steady hands, and an unflinching willingness to look at the world exactly as it is, rather than how we might wish it to be. If you were to stand in the gleaming financial district of Mumbai today, surrounded by the towering monuments of modern commerce, listening to the hum of a rapidly ascending global superpower, you would feel the palpable energy of a world in transition. It was in exactly this setting, on a high-stakes global stage, that Mark Carney recently stepped to the podium. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't engage in theatrical outrage. He didn't resort to the tired political tactic of direct name-calling or partisan bickering. Yet, the message he delivered was nothing short of a seismic shift in geopolitical strategy. It was a calm, clinical, and devastatingly accurate dismantling of the current global trade environment. More importantly, it was a bold declaration of a new era. Nations will no longer passively adjust to the chaotic volatility of the world stage. Instead, they will build independent structural power to resist coercion. To truly understand the gravity of this moment, we have to look at how Carney framed the current global order. He didn't describe it as a mere transition, a temporary bump in the road, or a cyclical downturn in diplomatic relations. He framed it as a rupture. This is a fundamental structural break from the past 2 decades of extreme global integration. For 20 years, the prevailing economic philosophy was that hyper-globalization would inevitably lead to shared prosperity and perpetual peace. We believed that if we tied our economies together tightly enough, conflict would become too expensive to wage. But, as Carney astutely pointed out, that extreme integration has instead laid bare a profound vulnerability. We have lived through a cascading series of crises: a devastating crisis in global finance in 2008, a paralyzing crisis in global health in 2020, a crippling crisis in energy triggered by the geopolitical fracturing in Eastern Europe, and an ongoing crisis in international security. These events didn't just stress the system, they shattered the illusion that extreme integration is synonymous with supreme security. And that brings us face to face with the immediate threat, the literal weaponization of our global economy. Think about the multilateral institutions countries have relied upon for decades to mediate disputes and coordinate collective problem solving. They are actively under threat. The World Trade Organization, the United Nations, the global climate agreements, this entire architecture of collective security is slowly being paralyzed. When the referee is removed from the field, the game inevitably descends into a brawl where only the most aggressive survive. In this new reality, great powers have fundamentally altered the rules of engagement. Economic integration is no longer a bridge between nations. It is an arsenal. Right before our eyes, we are witnessing the deployment of trade as leverage, where access to vital markets is dangled as a carrot or wielded as a stick to force geopolitical concessions. We are seeing financial systems, once the neutral plumbing of the global economy, utilized as mechanisms of direct coercion. We are realizing, to our collective horror, that supply chains are no longer just logistical pathways. They are critical vulnerabilities waiting to be exploited. When a nation relies on a single foreign adversary for the semiconductor chips that power its defense systems, or the active pharmaceutical ingredients that keep its citizens healthy, or the rare earth minerals required for its energy transition, that nation is fundamentally insecure. While Carney didn't mention the U.S. administration or Donald Trump by name, the implication was unmistakable. This is the cold, hard reality of how the United States now approaches its economic relationships. When you look at all of this, the ultimate conclusion is chilling, but it's absolutely necessary to say out loud: when the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself. A nation lacking the ability to feed its people, fuel its industries, or defend its borders is a nation without options. It is a vassal state masquerading as a sovereign entity. This, my friends, is the absolute crux of the Carney doctrine. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the tariff wall, and what it actually means for the future of global commerce. Make no mistake, we are entering the pay-for-access era. For decades, the baseline assumption of international trade, especially between close allies, was mutual benefit and lowered barriers. Today, we have to navigate the shift from a proposed 10% universal tariff to discussions of a 15% executive order. This represents a staggering new cost of doing business. The U.S. administration is clearly broadcasting that market access is no longer a mutual right governed by free trade agreements. It is a privilege that you have to explicitly pay for. And this payment comes in various complex forms: direct and punitive tariffs at the border, forced regulatory changes designed to favor domestic industries, and mandated investment commitments within the United States. If you are tracking these massive shifts in global power as closely as we are, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We break down these geopolitical maneuvers and what they mean for your future every single week. Now, let's get back to the strategy. I want to make a vital distinction here between temporary fixes and permanent structural shifts. In the past, Administrations might have used certain measures as temporary band-aids for specific economic dislocations, a brief period of protectionism to let a domestic industry catch its breath. But what we are witnessing right now is entirely different. Even if these tariffs are framed as temporary, they represent a fundamental philosophical shift toward transactional trade. The U.S. is signaling that tariffs will likely settle into place as the permanent baseline for engagement. If you want to sell to the American consumer, you are going to pay a toll. So, the multi-trillion-dollar question is, how does a nation actually respond to this? Well, the solution isn't diplomatic outrage. It isn't writing strongly worded letters to the WTO. And it certainly isn't retreating into economic isolationism. The true counterpunch to weaponized trade is aggressive, undeniable, and structural economic competitiveness. Instead of complaining about the leverage other nations hold, you have to neutralize that leverage through superior domestic policy. Carney outlined a massive $500 billion industrial strategy designed to make the domestic market so attractive, so efficient, and so profitable that global capital simply cannot ignore it, regardless of the tariff environment. At the heart of this strategy is a formidable arsenal of incentives. Consider the super deduction, a broad-based 100% tax write-off for critical investments. This isn't some niche subsidy. It covers everything from heavy manufacturing assets and infrastructure to artificial intelligence, research and development, clean energy generation, and electric vehicles. When a company knows it can immediately write off the entirety of its capital investment, the math of where to build the next factory changes overnight. And it goes deeper. This is layered with comprehensive investment tax credits, spanning the entire clean electricity chain. Think about the math for a second. The result of these combined policies drops the marginal effective tax rate for investment to a staggering 13%. To put that into perspective, that is 4.5 percentage points lower than the United States level, and exactly 1/2 of the G7 average. If a foreign government attempts to penalize your exports with a 10% tariff, but your domestic production costs are slashed by an overwhelmingly favorable tax environment, you have effectively absorbed the blow before it even lands. But let's be real, capital doesn't just look at tax rates, it looks at friction. That's exactly why this doctrine demands we slash infamous red tape. Bureaucracy is the silent killer of strategic autonomy. If it takes 10 years to secure the permits to build a critical mineral mine or clean energy facility, your tax rates simply don't matter. The strategy directly addresses past bureaucratic failures by guaranteeing that all major industrial projects will be approved within 2 years, achieved through tight, uncompromising cooperation with local governments. This is how you build a fortress economy. Yet, building that domestic fortress is only half the battle. The real antidote to all this volatility is deliberate, aggressive diversification. If access to one dominant market comes with an extortionate price tag, the only logical, self-preserving response is to go out and build 10 new markets. We have to reject tariff dependency. This requires a profound psychological shift in leadership. Right now, we are contrasting two very different styles of governance on the world stage. One operates in a constant state of defensive anxiety, paralyzed by unpredictability, constantly reacting to the latest social media post, executive order, or sudden policy reversal. The other style, the one advocated in Mumbai, builds resilience beyond that volatility. It focuses on building long-term, reliable partnerships that do not shift with the political winds. And let me tell you, there's a growing global consensus around this exact approach. The post-Davos optimism Carney highlighted is incredibly real. Across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, other nations are coming to the exact same realization. They are tired of being caught in the crossfire of great power competition. There is a massive global appetite for a positive, forward-looking agenda. The expanding economic relationship with India is the perfect illustration of this strategy in action. By embedding itself deeply into the Indo-Pacific, a nation diffuses its risk. You don't wait for the next tweet from a volatile trading partner. You build a relationship with an emerging superpower that you can rely on for decades to come. But to fully grasp the sheer magnitude of this strategy, we must peel back the layers of what strategic autonomy actually demands on a day-to-day operational level. Let's dig a little deeper, quite literally, into the physical building blocks of the 21st century. I'm talking about the critical mineral chessboard. For decades, the West outsourced the dirty, labor-intensive, and environmentally taxing work of mining and processing critical minerals. We allowed a near monopoly to form overseas in the processing of lithium, cobalt, graphite, and rare earth elements. We traded long-term security for short-term cost efficiency. Today, those minerals are not just commodities. They are the fundamental DNA of the future. They are the batteries in our electric vehicles, the magnets in our wind turbines, the screens on our smart devices, and the guidance systems in our advanced munitions. If you do not control the access to these materials, you do not control your own economic destiny, period. Strategic autonomy means bringing that supply chain home, or at least into the hands of trusted, verified allies. But it's not just what we pull out of the ground. it is how we pay for it. This brings us to a less visible but arguably more dangerous battleground, the weaponization of the global financial system. For the better part of a century, the US dollar and the Western-led financial clearing systems have been the undisputed bedrock of global commerce. They provided stability, liquidity, and trust. However, in recent years, we have seen this financial architecture increasingly utilized as an instrument of foreign policy through secondary sanctions, asset freezes, and exclusion from the SWIFT network. Strategic autonomy in the financial sector doesn't necessarily mean abandoning the dollar overnight. That is economically absurd for most nations. But it does mean building redundancies. It means diversifying sovereign reserves. It means developing bilateral clearing mechanisms that allow trade to continue even if the primary geopolitical winds shift against you. A nation that cannot clear its own sovereign transactions without permission from a foreign treasury is fundamentally vulnerable. This naturally leads me to the absolute linchpin of the modern economy: energy security. If there is one stark, unassailable lesson the world learned from the geopolitical fracturing in Eastern Europe, it is this: energy policy is security policy. The era of the petrostate holding democratic nations hostage by twisting a valve on a pipeline must end. We are moving from a world of petrostates to a world of electrostates. An electrostate generates its own power, secures its own grid, and cannot be extorted by a foreign autocrat holding a barrel of oil over its head. Building out this clean energy infrastructure is how you permanently remove the most potent weapon from the hands of hostile actors. I want to pause here and ask you, are we moving fast enough to secure our own energy grids, or are we still too reliant on foreign actors? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. I'll be reading through them later today. And yet, there's another battlefield we must urgently address. It is invisible, yet it governs everything from our power grids to our financial markets. I am speaking of data sovereignty and the race for artificial intelligence. We are entering an era where the nation that controls the data, controls the algorithms, and manufactures the advanced semiconductor chips will dictate the terms of the global economy. Strategic autonomy dictates that a nation cannot outsource its digital brain. It must invest heavily in domestic compute capacity and protect the private data of its citizens from foreign harvesting. But grand strategy, tax credits, and policy frameworks do not pour concrete. They do not weld steel. They do not write code. Ultimately, the success or failure of this entire doctrine rests on the human element, the workforce. You cannot execute a $500 billion industrial strategy without an army of skilled tradespeople. Rebuilding this workforce is a matter of profound national security. Reindustrializing our economies is not just about bringing factories back. It is about rebuilding the middle class, restoring dignity to blue-collar labor, and proving that democratic societies can still accomplish massive physical feats of engineering. This brings us to the architecture of how we engage with the rest of the world. Because autonomy does not mean isolation. In fact, true strategic autonomy in the 21st century is impossible for any nation acting entirely alone. We are witnessing the death of universal, hyper-globalized multilateralism and the birth of something far more pragmatic, minilateralism and friendshoring. Instead of waiting for 190 countries to agree on a trade rule at the WTO, like-minded nations are forming highly integrated exclusive economic and security blocs. They are mapping out their supply chains together, ensuring the entire process never leaves a trusted sphere of influence. Finally, let us speak of the harsh, undeniable reality that underpins all of this. Economic autonomy, financial firewalls, and secure supply chains mean absolutely nothing if a nation cannot physically defend them. Hard power matters. The Carney Doctrine's emphasis on expanding defense capacity is not warmongering. It is the ultimate expression of realism. You cannot deter an aggressor with a spreadsheet. You deter them with a robust, highly capable, technologically advanced military, backed by an industrial base that can surge production at a moment's notice. When you weave all of these threads together, you begin to see the true scale of what is being proposed. This is not merely an economic policy adjustment. It is a comprehensive, whole-of-society mobilization designed to secure a nation's future in an increasingly hostile world. As I wrap up today, I want to leave you with this thought. What we are really witnessing right now is the birth of a doctrine of value-based realism. It is a strategy that prioritizes strength over fear, diversification over dependence, and proactive building over reactive scrambling. The era of the waiting game is over. The nations that will truly thrive are the ones quietly but aggressively building alliances, lowering domestic costs, and embedding themselves in the fastest growing regions of the world. Sovereignty in the 21st century isn't a right granted by a piece of paper. It is a reality that must be constructed brick by brick. By refusing to simply pay the toll for market access, and instead building structural, undeniable leverage, we don't just survive the current geopolitical rupture. We change the balance of global power entirely. If you found this breakdown valuable and want sharp, no-spin analysis of the global power shifts shaping our future, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And before you go, let me know in the comments, is strategic autonomy actually achievable, or is it just a political buzzword? Let's get the debate started. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.